I'm Alex Michelson. This week, the issue is your last chance to vote. Peter Hamby from Puck and Snapchat breaks down surprising new numbers in California's U.S. Senate race. Politico's Melanie Mason is here to talk about the closest congressional races in the state. Plus, some of the top pundits in America weigh in on the presidential race. The issue is election special starts right now.
Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
Welcome to The Issue Is. We have brought in the big gun for this final show before voting officially ends in California's primary on Tuesday night. Peter Hamby is back. He has covered campaigns for years across the country. He is the host of Puck's fantastic podcast, The Powers That Be, delving into politics, media, and more. He's also the host of Snapchat's Good Luck America, where he talks to an entirely different demographic than he does on Puck. Welcome back to The Issue Is. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for showing my immense bookshelf there behind me.
I love a good bookshelf. So let's start with the U.S. Senate race, which has always been the biggest race around. And the big story of the last few weeks has been Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and his spending of over $11 million on ads to lift up Republican Steve Garvey in his campaign for U.S. Senate. Garvey hasn't had any money to spend, so Schiff's done it all for him. Over 60% of Schiff's spend has been talking about Garvey, hoping to lift him into second place in the top two race when the top two advance, regardless of party. And that seems to be working. Look at the latest Berkeley IGS poll, which is respected as probably the best poll in the state. It shows Garvey now at 27%, Schiff at 25%. That's a statistical tie. Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter back at 19%. And it's interesting also what the poll's saying about who is voting in this race.
Mm-hmm. The electorate in this poll, if you look at the crosstabs, is just not good for Katie Porter. And it is good for Garvey, and it is good for Schiff, who has most of the money and probably the biggest name ID. It is an older electorate. A lot of homeowners, not renters, that suggests old. And their voting set is also a little bit older, I think. But also, importantly, almost half of the electorate in this poll is people who define themselves as moderate or somewhat liberal. Only 19% of California voters in this poll say they're very liberal. So not a lot of liberals, not a lot of young people. That's who Katie Porter is targeting. And I mean, her closing message is all over the place. I haven't really even been sure what her message has been the whole time, other than I'm a mom with a whiteboard. But now she's splitting hairs and answering questions from reporters on the trail about corporate PAC donations. She's just not on offense, and that's not where you want to be in the closing days of a campaign.
So we want to show people why Schiff has been doing this strategy, because this poll also has an interesting numbers here. Here's a hypothetical matchup. Schiff, Garvey, November. Schiff starts out up 15 points. He's at 53. Garvey's at 38, about 8% undecided. That's why Schiff wants this matchup. If it is Schiff versus Porter, look at this. Mm-hmm. They're tied at 30% each, 40% undecided. She could clearly beat him. Mm-hmm. I know Schiff's team is concerned about that. That's why they're trying to do this. So I guess the heads up, if you really like Katie Porter, it's time to speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, you got to show up. And that would be an exciting election if you're a Democrat. And, you know, for my criticisms of Katie Porter's lack of a message, she would have time to pivot, have time to raise more money. She's a very good fundraiser. The other thing to keep in mind here is Donald Trump is in the news all the time, but he's in the news a lot in this last week. That helps Schiff because voters think that Adam Schiff is probably the most prominent anti-Trump figure in Congress. So the more Trump is in the news, people are like, oh, I want Adam in the Senate fighting against Mr. Trump.
Well, it seems like Schiff only says two names consistently, Donald Trump and Steve Garvey. And let's talk about Steve Garvey, though, because if he does advance, he hasn't said that much during this primary. We invited him to come on today. He chose not to come on today. Clearly a strategic decision, feeling like they didn't need to. But maybe, could that actually eventually be an advantage for him? The fact that if he was able to consolidate the Republicans, because we know they're never going to vote for Pencilneck, who hates Donald Trump, right? So he's got them.
Yes.
And they're going with him no matter what. They got nowhere else to go. And he's left himself room to be a more moderate you know, candidate, make it a lot about state issues, try to, you know, run against the establishment of a one-party state. I mean, maybe, possibly, is there a path for Steve Garvey?
A couple things. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's play the Garvey optimist here. One, President Biden is on the ballot in November. Not a lot of Democratic enthusiasm out there, and a lot of voters generally are kind of tuning out the news, tuning out politics. This is a well-documented phenomenon this year. So maybe, even though there's so many more Democrats in this state, maybe in November, people aren't super hyped about Biden or Adam Schiff, who, you know, let's be honest, isn't Mr. Charisma either. Maybe they don't show up, maybe. But I remember being at your debate with Politico, and in the room, people were sort of laughing at Steve Garvey for not taking a position on Trump and a variety of things. But, you know, there's tape of that can be run in TV ads. But it has positioned him to not be, you know, a raging MAGA guy. That hasn't stopped Democrats before in this state from calling any Republican a MAGA freak show. So we'll see. But, yeah, he's got a little bit of room.
And the other thing, too, that we shouldn't underestimate is the baseball connection with people of a certain age. People that are our age and younger don't have that connection to him in terms of baseball, but the people that are actually voting in this election, largely people over 65, do.
Steve Garvey has that name, especially in LA, especially in San Diego. Remember, he was a Padre too. So if he was younger and a little more nimble, I feel like we would be giving him a little more attention than we are.
Okay, let's talk about, because this electorate is older and more conservative, that's not potentially great news for Proposition 1, which is Governor Newsom's big bond measure, which is focused on mental health. Probably still going to win, but maybe tougher than you thought. And Governor Newsom having a tough week with this story about Panera Bread, which is now in the news. So basically, here's the story. The Governor Newsom signed this bill, which we see here, for a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers. There was a carve-out in that bill that said if you make bread at your restaurant and sell it, you don't have to do that. A lot of people, including Bloomberg, interpreted it as Panera Bread now doesn't have to do this when everybody else does have to do it. Panera Bread franchisee is a big donor to Gavin Newsom, and it looked really bad. Newsom's team coming out and saying, no, that's absurd, that's not true, and we actually think they do have to do it. But still, the whole story, not particularly great story about one-party control and about special interest power.
Totally, and if Gavin Newsom has liabilities politically, remember the French Laundry thing during the pandemic, it's that, you know, he's a rich, out-of-touch guy who's got his rich friends, he does favors with them, his rules, and then rules for everyone else. This also feels a little bit like a self-inflicted wound on Newsom's part. This Bloomberg story came out on Wednesday suggesting that Panera Bread CEO, Newsom donor, you know, got this carve-out. If you read the Bloomberg story carefully, maybe the source was like a labor person from the SEIU who was involved in these negotiations, whatever. If you scroll down like 10 paragraphs, Newsom's office declined to comment. And so then this story pops, it goes viral. Like, as a communications failure, this feels a little bit, if there is no carve-out, if that's true, which they're saying and their lawyers are saying, that's a communications failure on the part of Newsom's office.
Yeah. Okay, so Governor Newsom got his first nickname from Donald Trump this week also. I don't know if you saw this. So Donald Trump was at Eagle Pass at the border, and here's what he said.
You look at what this Governor Newscum from California, isn't that his name, Newscum?
So there you go. I guess that means you've made it. If you get that, they before it had a pretty good relationship. We'll see what happens there. But clearly the border is a big issue in the presidential race, which, by the way, California is voting for right now too, which we're not really talking about. What do you make of where the presidential race is at right now?
It already is over for Republicans, notionally, but it'll functionally be over between Super Tuesday and a couple more primaries after that, I think by March 19th. California provides 1/5, I think, of the Super Tuesday delegates for Republicans.
More delegates than anywhere else in the country. More Republicans live here than anywhere else in the country.
He's going to win winner take all. We know that if the polls are correct. They mostly have been.
What is Nikki Haley doing here? What's her end game? What's going on there?
I've known Nikki Haley since 2008. She loves the game, but her time in the sun passed her by the minute Donald Trump became the Republican nominee in 2015. The party changed. Before Trump, she, Chris Christie, Scott Walker, Rick Perry, these were all rising stars in the party, Marco Rubio. You know, she went into the Trump administration. People ask me this all the time because I covered South Carolina politics a lot. She's got nothing else to do. You know, she has to go home at some point. She would prefer to go home with a new reputation, book deal, speaking bookings, you know, maybe a TV contract. She's not going to be the VP. Trump doesn't like her. The Republican Party, as I just mentioned, regular Republican voters don't like her. Her negatives have gone only up in the last couple months among Republicans. So, you know, maybe CNN contract, maybe a book deal, who knows? Maybe she's preserving something for herself in the long run, but I don't see a future for her in the Republican Party.
Interesting thing also happening is what's happening with third parties, which is very rarely talked about on mainstream media, even though it's really talked about online. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., last weekend, you went out to Costa Mesa, where they hosted the Libertarian Conference. You talked to him. He was sort of putting his foot in the pool a little bit about whether to get an endorsement from them. What did you see?
RFK Jr. is polling pretty well among constituencies that Joe Biden needs, young people and black voters in swing states. We've seen this in poll after poll after poll. I think he takes little from Trump, takes little from Biden, but I think if you look at the polling, probably hurts Biden a little more. His issue is ballot access. He's on the ballot in Utah. His campaign says he has enough signatures to get on the ballots in New Hampshire and Hawaii, a huge political battleground, as we know. A super PAC supporting him said they have enough signatures to get on the ballot in Georgia and Arizona, which are very important swing states. That's bad news for Biden. But he needs to get on ballots. And so he's doing this big signature campaign. As a backstop, he was flirting with the Libertarian Party, which is on the ballot in like 36 states. I was down there with him in Orange County. These were purebred, small government libertarians who loved the gold standard and, you know, Ron Paul. They did not like him. They did a straw poll at the end. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got 1 vote in the presidential straw poll. This is the California Libertarian Convention, but that just suggests, you know, his flirtation with the Libertarian Party isn't going to work out over the next few months. So he's got to get on ballots some other way than the Libertarian Party.
There are very few things that both parties agree on, Democrats and Republicans, but one of the only things they do is they don't like third parties.
Nope.
They want to keep the system going the way that it is, and they work together to try to stop people from messing with
The Democratic
that system.
National Committee currently is suing Robert F. Kennedy's super PAC. They've hired staffers to go after RFK Jr. on the communications front. Like, they are working it to make sure he's not on the ballot and a threat to Joe Biden.
Up next, Melanie Mason is going to fill us in on some of the top local races, but we go to break with music. And when you've been on the show before, you've told us that The Band is your favorite band.
That's right.
So here is The Band with The Wait.
Nice.
Take it away.
Take a load off
Leave on.
Fanny. Take a load for free.
Yes. Thank you.
Take a load off Fanny.
This is so your vibe.
From the South, man.
Put the load right on me.
Thanks for being here, everybody. I'm Elex from Fox 11 Los Angeles.
And I'm Melanie Mason with Politico.
For me, one of the highlights of covering the primary election was co-moderating California's first U.S. Senate debate alongside Politico's Melanie Mason. And for our last episode before the primary, Melanie Mason is back with us. Just as much pressure. Is that great to see you? Welcome back to The Issue Is.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So what I hope we can do with this segment is basically walk you through some of the biggest races on the ballot as you are deciding and try to answer a lot of those questions that people text me and call me with. So let's start, Melanie, though, with the U.S. Senate race. LaFonza Butler was appointed to fill Dianne Feinstein's seat. And she's only filling it till November, because that's as far as they could do this legally without calling a special election. So somebody's going to potentially be in that job for a few months. But people can vote twice, right?
Right. You'll see the same candidates on the ballot for those 2 slots. And essentially, yes, you're voting for who is going to serve from November to January of 2025, and then who actually serves the full 6-year term, really is the full successor to the late Senator Dianne Feinstein.
And wouldn't it be something if it was 2 different people?
It's happened. There's been precedent in Sacramento. I've seen it happen. So
yeah, and remember, in California, the top 2 advance regardless of party. which is why you're able to see some of these shenanigans on both sides. Okay, let's talk about some of the other races that are happening, congressional races. The one that I think most state political reporters are looking at the closest is California 22. This is 22nd District. David Valadao is in that race. He is the Republican incumbent. Remember, he voted to impeach Donald Trump. So has a MAGA challenger named Chris Mathis, who is running. There are also two Democrats running, Rudy Salas and Melissa Hurtado. And the question is either one of those Democrats going to make it in this top two? Because things are complicated sometimes with the top two system.
It's definitely the Democrats that are feeling the most nervous. They have this candidate, Rudy Salas, who the establishment has coalesced around. He ran in 22 against Valadao. The DCCC endorsed him, which they don't typically do in primaries, and sort of said, that's our guy. But you do have this state senator, Melissa Hurtado, who's on the ballot. She hasn't raised a lot of money, but she is a somewhat known figure. And if she siphons away enough votes, if that splits the Democratic vote enough, you could very well have a situation where two Republicans advance. And that would be a huge embarrassment for Democrats because that is a targeted seat for them in November. That's a seat they think they can flip. And if they lose that opportunity entirely, that has national implications.
Let's talk about another interesting race that's happening, which is the race to replace Katie Porter in the House. Because she's running for the Senate, she can't run for the House. Even if she loses on March 5th, she can't go back and run for the House. And so here's a look at some of the people that are running. There is Scott Baugh, who is a Republican who almost beat her last time around. There's Democrats Dave Min, Democrat Joanna Weiss, and Republican Max Ukrapina. And this has gotten really nasty and really expensive on the Democratic side.
This is a seat that Democrats feel very nervous about because Katie Porter, who is a very formidable candidate, she only won that seat by 3 percentage points last cycle, and that's when she had a huge fundraising advantage over Scott Baugh, who was running again as a Republican. So the fact that she is now running for Senate, there are these two Democrats that are running in their place. Dave Min, State Senator Dave Min, really had kind of most of the Democratic establishment behind him, but then he got a DUI last spring. And what that has really done is change the nature of the race. You saw Joanna Weiss, who's a first-time candidate, a Democratic activist, get in to challenge him and argue that Democrats cannot afford to lose this seat. It's too risky to nominate somebody that has this arrest record. And what we've seen is just this like full-on mudslinging fest between these two candidates.
And millions of dollars, including millions of dollars from outside money from AIPAC in this race against Dave Min. So it's kind of unclear who is going to win that race. By the way, if you want more information on all of that, I hosted a debate for that race. We had all the candidates for the 47th district come in. You can check out my YouTube page, youtube.com/Elex Michelson, for more detailed analysis and interviews with a lot of those folks. All right, we have gone through so much together through this process. We want to have a little bit of fun and get to know you a little bit better. You know, you've seen our personal issues game on this show before, but now that you're in the hot seat, we get to play it with you, okay?
Okay.
So you ready? What is your favorite TV show?
30 Rock.
Go-to karaoke song?
Don't Stop Me Now by Queen.
Ooh. What's your favorite book?
Oh my gosh, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien.
Who is your favorite sports team?
Oh, it's the Dodgers.
And who is your favorite Dodger? Don't say Steve Garvey, because that's not fair right now.
Freddie Freeman. Gotta say Freddie.
Who is your all-time favorite musical artist?
Well, it's the Queen. It's Beyonce.
And what is it about Beyonce you love so much?
What do you not love about Beyonce? She just, you know, she does it all, and we're all grateful to be living in this Beyonce era.
I know your love for her, so we have it ready. What is the #1 song in America right now, according to Billboard?
It's Texas Hold'em.
Country Beyonce takes us to break. Melanie Mason, job well done this entire primary season. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And this is for you.
Texas, ain't no hold'em. Lay your cards down, 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 down.
Up next, a local conference bringing together some of the nation's top pundits to talk about the presidential race. You're watching The Issue Is. Who do you think would be most effective for Donald Trump to pick as VP? Recently, I was honored to co-moderate USC's Warshaw Conference on Practical Politics, bringing together experts on both sides of the aisle to discuss the stakes in the 2024 race.
Do you want to go back to the chaos and disruption and division and insurrections? Or do you want to continue on the path to build back America better?
When you go and fill up your gas tank, is it costing you more than it did 4 years ago? When you're going and buying your groceries, is it costing you more than it did 4 years ago? And for a lot of people, it has become increasingly difficult to live under a Biden economy.
Democrats and Republicans alike said this is going to be a very close race, decided by 77,000 votes in a few states in 2016 and 44,000 votes in a few states in 2020.
For most voters, they will be torn between their doubts about Donald Trump's character, which are huge, those concerns, and their doubts about Joe Biden's ability to do the job.
It's a values election. People are less voting about their preference and, well, so-and-so governed well or governed poorly, or it's more about your contempt for the opposition or your fear of the opposition.
Some really smart, cool people there. You can watch our full panel discussion at youtube.com/Elex Michelson. And you can listen to extended conversations with all our guests, including many of the candidates on your ballot right now. Just search for The Issue Is wherever you stream. We'll be right back. So, this is it. The time to cast your ballot. Decisions are made by those who show up. And if you don't show up, your decision will be made by somebody else. Voting in California has never been easier. The best source of voting information is the website for California's Secretary of State. Go to sos.ca.gov/elections. Now you'll find voting guides, and you can input your zip code and find polling places near you. You can vote by traditional mail, drop off your ballot in a ballot drop-off, or head to a voting center near your house. Those voting centers are open now throughout the state. They're open all weekend and will close on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Go vote! And join us next week as we break down who you voted for. Thanks for watching The Issue Is.